I'm joined today by Taya, Colton, and McKenna Kyle. They're the family of renowned Navy SEAL sniper Chris Kyle. Now, Chris was murdered in 2013, and his story was told in the hit film American Sniper. Today, his family is joining us to share his life and legacy here on Washington Times Higher Ground. Now, Taya, with your story, obviously there's been a feature film, there have been books, there have been interviews, but really getting a chance to sit down with all of you, because Colton and McKenna, you were very young when your father, Chris, was killed. Now you're adults, and I would just love to hear from you first. Colton, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you're working on and what is going on in your life.
Well, thank you very much for having us. It's definitely a pleasure, and we're excited to talk to you too. Right now, I'm working on American Sniper. So, as a brand, my mom's done a few things in the past, but she specifically left it for either McKenna or I or both of us to work with. And I have a passion for it, and McKenna has her own passions, which she can talk about. But I'm currently selling merchandise. So, I'm starting with hats and t shirts and hoodies, flags, decals, that sort of thing. My big ambitions are to move into the tactical space and firearms. So anything associated with that, if that's range bags or plate carriers or that sort of thing. There are definitely some big things in the works. I'm very excited. I just got back from a convention, so I'm really looking forward to what the near and far future holds for myself and for American Sniper.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, this brand, American Sniper, obviously people know the name, they know what it stands for. But what is it like for you to sort of come into this knowing your father's legacy, knowing who he was, the person he was, and to spearhead that? What has that been like for you?
It's definitely a blessing. I'm very excited about it. I know a lot of people would see this as a lot of pressure and big shoes to fill, but I've had the blessed perspective and opportunity to see this as not. I'm not trying to fill his shoes, and I'm not trying to take on anything he's done in the way that he would have done it. But I'm going to do this in my way and honor and respect him and his legacy in his way. So what that means is I get to honor him and pay respects and move forward in what he was already passionate about in my way. And I'm really excited about that. I feel good about it.
Yeah, I'll say too, Billy. Yeah, I think one of the cool things of the many cool things I think about Chris was that it was important to him that Colton could be his own man and McKenna could be her own woman. And especially with his son feeling like he doesn't have to follow in his footsteps. There are some dads, and we all know them, where it's like they expect that their son does exactly what they did or does exactly what they feel is best, and they want to sort of guide it. But even when the kids were little, we talked about how it's God's calling on their life, not ours. And I know Colton with American Sniper in particular, he's kind of pulled it into like 7 qualities that he shares with his dad that he's really passionate about. And I often think, I mean, we were talking to Marcus Luttrell too, the lone survivor, and he was saying the same thing. Like he doesn't expect his kids to serve in the military. If they want to and that's where they're called, great. And if they don't, they don't. But it's I think Chris would be really proud that Colton's making his own way and that McKenna's not doing things, the way everybody else does either. They're just kind of forging their own path. I think he'd really like that.
No, I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yep.
What an amazing legacy of trusting God to really let the Lord lead you where you're supposed to go instead of expecting something that maybe isn't what God has for you. That kind of brings me to you, McKenna, because you are doing some really amazing work yourself. You've been doing ride alongs, working with the local sheriff's department, and you have some really unique goals and aspirations. So I'd love to hear a little bit about those.
Yes, sir. So I've been doing social media for Sheriff Wayburn of Tarrant County, and it's been really cool. I really enjoy it, and just kind of seeing what they actually do. I feel like it's so different than what people think of what it is, and getting to know the people too is really cool to me. And I also I'm planning on being a jailer for Tarrant County, and I think that'll be really helpful. I'm planning on eventually being a sheriff's deputy, and from all of the deputies that I've talked to so far, they've all said that that's where they started, and they think it was really helpful for them. They learned how to talk to people and how to treat them just as as human beings, even though they've done things that obviously we don't agree with, but they're still human beings and we can treat them like that. And so now we don't have to start that way. You don't have to start as a jailer, but it's definitely helpful.
And so, Billy, isn't that crazy that like you can see her, she's like petite and beautiful and gentle. And so seeing her wanting to be a jailer, some of my friends are like, what? McKenna? But you've talked to some women who are jailer, or a woman who's a jailer.
Yeah, I finally got the opportunity to do a ride along with a woman, and she's a deputy now, and she also started in the jail. And so I was asking her about it because at first I was thinking, now that they don't have to start as jailers, I was thinking, well, maybe I don't want to do that because it does seem a little scary. But the more I talked to her, she was saying it's not as scary as you might think, and it really is helpful. She was the one who really kind of explained it the most to me. And I was asking her, like, even as a woman, like, is it more dangerous? And she said, not really. It's just that the prisoners will be a little bit more disrespectful with their words sometimes. But her advice was, one of her go-to lines was, "What did I say or do that made you think it was okay to say that to me or to do that to me?"
That's
And
actually
most of the time,
a really good
yeah, I
line. I like
agree.
that
And so
line.
most of the time she said that they would apologize, and sometimes they would, try to argue with her a little bit, but most of the time they would apologize. And so it wasn't necessarily more dangerous, it was just they maybe had some more disrespectful things to say.
McKenna, what was it? And this is just for a final question on this piece of the conversation, because I think it's really interesting and important. But what made you want to do this job? What was it that attracted you to it?
Um, I've always loved law enforcement. Like, it's always been something that I've been interested in. And when I was little, I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to be in like the FBI or something like that. Or maybe a little bit more recently, I thought maybe a detective. And so, with the opportunity to work for the sheriff and do his social media, I've been able to talk to detectives and different people in different positions. And so I get to see what it's like because, like I said before, it's not how most people think it is. And so it's definitely always been an interest. But the more I learn about it, I think what draws me to being a jailer is I do like to talk to people, and I I like to talk to people that are in maybe some worse off situations, and I like to be able to help them if I can. And so that would be really cool to me if I can help anyone. And then on top of that, that is in law enforcement, and then I can work my way to being a deputy. I'm not exactly sure what's the main draw for me, but I definitely feel very drawn to it. I know that.
Yeah, I mean, you're called to it, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about before. And, today I'm watching you listen to your kids and just seeing the amazing adults that they're becoming and everything that your family has been through. You have faced a lot. You've been through a lot, all of you together. What is it like for you, Taya, to see your kids be in the place that they're in right now, to hear what they're saying, pushing towards success, doing really amazing things? And doing incredible in light of all that's happened?
It's such a good question too, because I'm very I guess there's like a peaceful calm about it because I feel like their relationship with God is so strong and their love for Jesus is strong, and so I feel like that component is in place, which means that I trust that God really is leading them, right? But the next thing, I don't know about you, Billy, but I was raised, we're going to college. My sister and I, there was no, we're thinking about college. There was no, we might not do, like, college was, it was just going to happen, right? And I think, back in my day, that was, they're just, yeah, it was an expectation. And so I had the expectation, I think, that my kids would graduate high school and go right to college. And this is part of me doing this trust fall with God is if they're, Colton's taking a gap year to do American Sniper, and I'm sure he can tell you more about it. But how long that gap year lasts. Maybe it's a gap 2 years or three, but they're both really smart. They've both, been very accomplished in school. And he eventually, like, I'll let him talk about it, but apologetics, theology, I could see him getting his doctorate in that. He's talked about that. McKenna is brilliant. And I'm like, baby, please, you guys, so many things you can do. Like, can we do college while you're being a jailer? Like, can we, because I think it's hard to do those things and then go back. Having said that, I know plenty of people who have done exactly what she's talking about, which is they went into law enforcement and then they did college at night and they've, got their master's. And so it is an interesting thing as a parent to say, I really am going to I'm going to support you in going where you feel the Spirit's calling. And I'm also a human being who sometimes goes, am I doing that? Should I be pushing harder? Right. But I don't want them to go do something. I don't think college is good if you're going to be miserable, if you're already socially mature. And I think they are socially mature. They don't love to party. They don't love to, fraternities and sororities are not attractive to them. And so I'm thinking, well, then I guess you just do it at your own pace. I mean, people do it more online now, I guess.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. I think in a few years, college is going to look totally different than it does right now. It looks different than it did 20 years ago when I went to school. And it's kind of crazy. I'm just sort of seeing how it's all going to shake out. But looking at your story, Colton, and I want to come to you on this because you guys were really young when you lost your dad. And I'd love to know how you dealt with that. What was it like to grow up having this really public facet to this story? People knew who your father was. And with his death, that was really out there. How did you navigate the public side of your father and that loss?
Well, definitely it was very difficult. What made it much easier was that even though my dad's story was public and our family story was public, that McKenna and I were not. And I'm very blessed to have my mother's foresight in that, and in being very intentional about not having us be public, so we could grieve in private and we could have our own relationships and outside of the public eye. And what that really means mostly is outside of the pressure of the public eye, not just being seen, but nobody knowing what's becoming of us. And so not expecting certain things of us or reacting negatively to anything that we might have gone through, felt, whatever it may be. So with that being said, it was still very difficult. Obviously, losing someone you love is never easy for anyone. Certainly not when it's unexpected and entirely unexpected. So my coping mechanism was to not feel as much as possible. And the best way to do that for me was to distract myself. So we had plenty going on at the time. My mom was doing a number of things, including Patriot Tour. In the past few years, I've gone to therapy. Our whole family has gone to therapy for it with a Christian therapist that comes at it from a faith-based perspective, which I think has been monumental to my emotional and mental healing. My faith has been paramount in healing. The fact that I can trust that God is at work and that He brings good things through it. And when you choose to look from the perspective and lens of this is a godly worldview and God is in this world, then I can see the good for what it is. And when you're looking for something, you're typically going to find it. And that has been very helpful to me, just to be so grateful and to really take in how blessed we are that even though we lost someone that was so instrumental to our lives, that we're blessed even more throughout and through the loss of him. I don't like to consider going back in time and changing things or not changing things. Life is what it is, but I do see what it has changed. It's made me grow up a lot quicker mentally. And I've been around plenty more adults and a lot of adults in the service, in the military and veterans and first responders and those kinds of things. These same people that have gone through a lot of similar things with trauma and maybe not losing their father, but losing many friends and possibly children or siblings, whatever it may be. And so to be with those people throughout that was extremely helpful as well. To be able to relate to somebody and have somebody relate to me. A lot of people wanted to share their stories, and I always had the opportunity to be comforted by someone, even if I had no idea who they were, because they simply knew of my dad or respected my dad, or we were already friends, and they'd experienced something similar. So, uh, very, very, very blessed.
Yeah, I mean, what a mature way to be looking at that, because there are people who are 60, 70 years old who have gone through hard things in their lives and they don't look at it that way. They don't see the connections. They don't understand how God works. And it sounds like you really have a good command of that. Now, McKenna, for you, what was that like? Because everybody's journey is different. There are ups, there are downs, and it can be a struggle. What was it like for you to process through everything that unfolded?
It was, I mean, obviously it was hard for me. I think I started off trying to just find the positive in it all. And one of my biggest things was to not focus on my own pain and to just focus on my mom and my brother and how can I help them and what can I do for them. And that kind of started a little bit of people pleasing, which it can be helpful, but it's also not always the best when it's at the expense of yourself. So um, that was something that that was a coping mechanism. And then I kind of started to do that more and more where I would focus on other people's trauma and other people's pain so that I didn't have to look at my own. And another part of that was I didn't really see the world as good anymore, and I didn't want to because I felt like if I did see something as perfect or good again and it was taken away, then that would be awful again. I would feel the same emotions and I didn't want to. So I just kept myself feeling that the world is a bad place and people are bad. And so I found friends who had gone through lots of trauma and experienced lots of abuse in different ways. And so they shared my view of the world. And it was also helpful for me to focus on their pain and try and help them through their things. And so now this is very recent, but I'm starting to find things that I'm grateful for and see the world as better and surround myself with people who do see the world as good and who are able to help me. And I am able to focus on myself now and focus on my own trauma and how I'm feeling and kind of speak up for myself a little bit more.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, Taya, obviously, you're a mom who's been incredibly loving and supportive. You've been there for your kids throughout this entire time. And there's so much that you can't control, though, even in being there and doing everything you've done, the emotions, the feelings that come from an experience like what you've all been through. What is it like for you to hear your kids talk through this, right? You've obviously had the conversations privately, but to hear them share this so openly in the way that they have.
It's really incredible for me. I mean, I just sit here and think, what a blessing that I get to hear them talk about it and share it like they're sharing right now. Because you're right. I mean, we have conversations along the way, but it's different when I get to sort of be the fly on the wall, listening to how they would explain it to someone else. And so that's been, I've been really delighted, I guess, is to hear them say it for a couple of reasons. One is I hope it blesses somebody who's listening, because I think the fact that we all had different coping mechanisms, I hope makes it relatable, our experience. And I also just feel this tremendous gratitude that we've come as far as we have, because there are times along the way, as a parent, that you wonder, am I doing what I can do? And I was in tremendous grief, and one of my things was, it was easier for me to stay busy, and we had way too many things, but there were also all these different attacks, and we were taken advantage of, and lawsuits, and family members that, we all handle grief differently, and they kind of turned theirs to maybe a more hateful place, in my opinion. And so going through all that at the same time, I recognized that I was not the mom that I wanted to be either during this time. And so it feels miraculous that God is so good that he would do the work to heal all of us, because I could not have done it. I remember crying with Colton one day. We were in the car, and I said, I just said, I know this is ridiculous. But I thought when I had you that I felt like I could be a really good mom. And I knew I couldn't be perfect, but I really felt like I was gonna, I was gonna nail this thing. And then McKenna, came along real soon after, and I was like, maybe I'm not as good as I think, but I think I can still do a good job. And it was this realization that I was so far from what I thought I could have been, especially had Chris lived, but also just in general, like I'm just not at all the mom that I started out thinking I could be, because of the grief and the attacks and the anger I had, and this desperate feeling of I'm drowning all the time and I can barely stay afloat. Um, and so I have prayed prayers that I would not have prayed had Chris not died, and had I not gone through all of that. Like with McKenna, I've prayed, crying, like, God, I feel like I broke her heart, and the window is done. I can't go back and redo it. Can you fix it? Can you mend it for me? Will you do that? And I would see this transformation happen in her. And that's, to me, that's miraculous. I mean, I would wake up the next morning and feel it. And things like Colton, if you wanted to go on a hunt with some people, and he's very responsible, and me feeling like, and I mean, I could just tell him and cry and say, I want you to go. I know you're very responsible. I also know that somebody used a gun to kill dad. So obviously I know that there are dangers if people aren't, I didn't think there was anyone with evil intent, but if they weren't careful. And so I would share with him, this is a big leap of faith for me to say, I'm not there to keep an eye on everyone around you. You're 11 years old, and I can't guarantee that everybody else will. And like Colton said, he grew up fast, and so did McKenna. And I feel like it's by the grace of God and prayer. And obviously I was doing as much discernment as I could, and I felt like God was giving me the peace. So the human part of me could have said, no, I don't care. Even though discernment says this will be a safe trip for you, like I felt the Holy Spirit give me that peace. I could have let the flesh take over and be like, you guys are never going to be around guns, and you're never going to, and so I'm grateful that God gave me that balanced perspective of somebody chose evil when they chose to kill Chris. This guy, according to psychiatrists and the prosecution and defense, didn't have PTS. He never had traumatic event in his life. It was a choice. And so I have to allow for that to exist in the world, and allow for the world to still be far better than, I guess I should say it differently. To allow for there to be evil that exists, but for good to be overwhelmingly present as well.
Yeah, it's that Ephesians 6 understanding that this battle we have going on exists. And you guys experienced this, right? The battle between good and evil. You went through that. When something like this happens, a lot comes along with it, right? Now, Taya, how did you handle, and this is one of the biggest issues when you go through something like what you did, how did you handle forgiveness? How did you navigate that?
It's been an interesting one, and I definitely think it'll be cool to hear what they have to say too. I remember one time in church from family members that I told you there was some destruction in the family, and it was heartbreaking to me. And I remember hearing a sermon preach and say, are you pouring everything out on the altar for God? And me thinking, yes, I feel like I'm doing everything. And I thought, well, wait a minute. But if I don't have them in my life right now, am I still pouring out everything for God? And so the pastor was very helpful and said, Taya, it's the same as the Israelites when God said, go into this cave, and they decide, 2 for it, 10 against it, and they wander. And God says, you're going to be wandering now for 40 years or till the next generation. And when they say, God, will you forgive me? He says, I forgave you the moment you did it, but it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. And so he was teaching me forgiveness is forgiving the person for being human and for making decisions that were harmful. It doesn't mean that you have to have that person in your life to do more harm. So that for me was a big thing. And now I'm at a place where I wonder if there are people that I felt just devastated and heartbroken over. Is there a place to go and ask for, I feel like I've forgiven them in my heart. Is there a place to go back and say, hey, I just, they're not asking for my forgiveness, but is there any way to build a bridge? I don't know. I'm still working on that part, if that makes sense. But forgiving people for being human and falling far from what was the intent that God had for their lives is kind of where I get to on most things. I can forgive them for being human.
Yeah, I have to tell you, that's a really healthy place to be, especially going through again everything that you have faced with the killing of your husband, to be able to be in that place. Now, Colton, for you, how did you deal with and navigate forgiveness?
Um, I would say in a very similar way to what my mom has said, having grace and trying to be as understanding as you can to other people. Um, like she said, other people are human and we make mistakes, and um, all of us human beings are emotional, and so hopefully we can tame our emotions and use our emotions rather than our emotions using us. But it's a very difficult thing to do that, and we all fail. So understanding that, I feel as though I've always been very introspective. So recognizing my own faults time and time again and being able to forgive myself has really helped me forgive other people. Recognizing when I was angry at someone, and even though I may not have gone out of my way to hurt them, I need to check myself and say, do they really deserve this, or can I be better than this and show them kindness regardless? But exactly what my mom has said, we've come under fire time and time again. It seems like, in a way that only would be spiritual. Um, Watching her navigate this, and I want to retrace my steps a little bit. As I was talking about coping with grief, I talked about a lot of people, and I didn't really talk about my mom. And she's been very humble and vulnerable, but I can't tell you how grateful I am, and I don't. I It's difficult to comprehend, obviously, for anyone having a different person in a different situation, but um, I think that's part of the immense blessing that God has given us, is giving us a unique family dynamic and unique people with unique strengths that uh, has given us the opportunity to flourish when it just shouldn't be possible. So um, my mom has played such a large role in that, and being able to talk to her and being an open communicator with her. She has largely shaped the way I communicate and think through things, and why I do have so much grace and forgiveness, because it seems like every time I have an issue or some sort of conflict, I can go to her and we can talk it through. And it's not like either of us will have necessarily the right answer, but we're going to get there because we can communicate effectively, and we can put our hearts on the table and without guards, because we both have the other's best interest at heart. Um, and so through that, and through her perseverance, it seems like inhuman. It'll bring me to tears, but through seeing her persevere and forgive time and time again has showed me what it looks like to really forgive others and forgive myself, and have grace and compassion.
Taya, I think obviously you've had a huge impact on your kids and how they've been able to process and deal with all of this and come out on the other side. And being able to talk with all three of you has been absolutely incredible. You're amazing people, and you can tell that these kids come from a great family, wonderful parents, a loving mother. And just hearing again that process of forgiveness. McKenna, I want to come to you because we haven't heard from you yet on this. How did the forgiveness piece of the puzzle work for you?
I think it may have been a little bit more difficult for me. I think I feel very protective over my family, and that sometimes gets in the way of my forgiveness. Um the guy who killed my dad, it took me a while to be able to say I do forgive him, but that doesn't mean that I'm okay with what he did. I think forgiveness is more for ourselves and saying it's not okay what they did, but it's okay for me to let go of it, and I don't have to hold on to it. Just because they did that, I don't have to carry it. And I can give it to God, and I know that it's really amazing that we can give it to God and that He will take care of it and that He's in control of it all. He already has the plan. I don't have to do anything with it. I don't even need to carry it at all. It does nothing for me. And people in our family too, that's maybe been a little harder for me even to forgive, because I feel like it has been hard on my mom and my brother and I. And so it's weird. I think I just have to let go of it and say it's not for me to carry.
Well, when it comes to forgiveness, sometimes you have to sort of continue. It's a process. It's not a one-time thing. I have a number of friends who have survived really horrible situations and they've had to go through forgiveness repeatedly, right? It's a process. It's a place you need to be in. When something happens, there might be a reminder suddenly of what you went through, the emotions, the anger can come back. And so for a lot of people, forgiveness is a journey that you're on, and you have to continue to make sure that you're not controlled by those anger and those other emotions as well. Taya, when you look at Chris's killing and everything that came after it, how did you experience that? How did it reshape you, maybe? All the things you thought you knew about life, about faith?
It's a great question. It changed, I want to say, everything. And I actually think that now when I look back, and I don't say that lightly. I remember driving back from church one day and just, we were listening to worship music and singing, and all of a sudden it just hit me how far I have come as a person. Like, I am not who I was. And in my faith in particular, it made me like really tear up, and just gratitude and awe, and kind of this realization of like, whoa, I am so changed. And I'm grateful for the change. It's one of those things where, you don't, I guess you just live your life and things are changing. And I had a strong sense that I was not going to be who I would be one day. I knew that. Like, I knew all of this would be changing. But to come to this place where I've never been. I didn't grow up like this. My parents went to church, at an Episcopal church, but we weren't listening to worship music at home like we do. And I just, and to have that with my kids and to see, how incredible they are, that, and if God had asked me at the time, if God had said, Taya, listen, you're going to be a better person, like you're going to be forged differently and a better character, and you're going to know more of me, and you're going to be more faithful, and your kids will be stronger. We just have to take Chris. I would have said no, absolutely. Like, no, I don't want that for any reason. And so I do think it's interesting how the devil can make a move and God can just redeem it, and just like flood it with goodness. Like, oh, you want to play a game with my kids? Like, that's what I picture, God doing. Like, okay, you want to do that, Tim? Go for it. Because you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to flood them with goodness, and then, how you like me now kind of thing. I feel like that's what he did. And I would trade it. I would trade for them to not have to go through this, pain and the lessons, even knowing that they're set up for life, probably a lot more than most people their age, because they're resilient and they know how to do things that most people wouldn't know. But yeah.
They're equipped for life, and you can see that talking to them. You can see that there are some 35-year-olds who are not equipped for life the way that, your kids are, and that the two of you are just sitting here being able to talk with you. And so, I want to just talk about Chris's memory. How do you keep Chris's memory alive? It's been 11 years. What do you do to make sure that he is still very much a part of your family?
It's an interesting thing. I don't know if it's healthy or not for me personally, but I have very much felt like he was just a part of things still. And so it's been fairly easy for me to do that. We do have our foundation, Taya and Chris Kyle Foundation, right? So his picture and his name and all that is there. I do still share on social media things about him, so I do that. with the kids, when I feel something overwhelmingly, like every once in a while, I'll feel something that I just feel overwhelmed and I'll share it. Like I just had this like very strong sense that dad is very proud of you. And I try to never speak for him. I don't think people should do that. Chris would this, I don't know I don't know what Chris would do, but on things that I feel very strongly about, I will share that. Or like the other day, we have a salt gun to like kill flies, in the house. It's just like salt pellets. And Colton got one, and I just had this like thought in my head. I felt like if Chris was over there, he would have pointed it at me and like shot me in the butt, with the salt thing, like just, and knowing that I would come after him and like it would be on, like what? And so every once in a while I have those feelings, and when I do, I just share it with him, and I try not to make a point of like his birthday or the anniversary of his death. I asked them when they were little, we can do this, like we can make a day of this, or we cannot, and I can share it with you or not. What's the preference? And I think their preference, which I fully support, was just days are hard enough when like you said, it comes when it comes. We don't have to make a day to feel bad. And so I would just kind of honor him the way I could. It's just organic. I guess that's a better way to say it. We try not to make it about a certain day a year or anniversaries as much as just organically keep him
And
there.
Colton, for you personally, what do you do that helps keep your father's memory alive?
Well, obviously, I'm working with American Snipers, so I'm constantly thinking of um, what he would want and what he was passionate about, how he lived his life, and those kinds of things, and honoring him in the way that I know his priority because of my relationship with him as a father. With the time that I did have, I know that his priority would be what I want, and so I'm very grateful for that freedom, that pressure that I don't have on my shoulders. That I need to make sure I'm doing exactly what he would want because he would want what I would want. Um, but in reality, it is his legacy, and I'm carrying it on. And so, what I get to take from that are what I believe he was most passionate about, and what was most evident that was passed on to me. And so, I get to represent those in my own way. So, I have the opportunity and the platform to step up and say, I'm going to stand for the same things my father stood for in the way that I stand for them. And so, that's one way. Um, we do have some pictures and things like that around the house, and I say some. We have a few pictures around the house of him, and we can remember him that way. I know, like my mom said, different people deal with grief different ways, and so for some it's I need it around me all the time. I need to be reminded, and for some it's I don't want anything. I want to forget it's even happened. So for me, I'd like to see it. I try to see it more pragmatically. He was here and he did these things, and we need to recognize those. And now he's not here, and so what we get to do is step into this new age and this new era of our lives, and while remembering what he did do for us and what he provided and what he taught us and all of that. So um, I often wish that I would be able to have certain conversations with him and ask him about life experiences and all manner of things and just talk with him. That's what I miss the most rather than anything like experiences. But learning, I love to learn a lot of things. I have a lot of interest. So that's what I miss the most, and I think about him often. But that gives me the opportunity to research it and to ask my mom questions about memories and situations that she's been in that she remembers. And so I get to appreciate those for what they are, but I don't want to take it so far as to somehow to be delusional or live in the past or be stuck in a place where I can't move forward. And so, kind of that duality, appreciate what I had and understand that I don't, and move forward in knowing what I know now and appreciating what I know now.
Yeah, that's a really healthy way to process everything that's gone on and moving forward and just being able to look at it with a healthy perspective. Now, McKenna, I don't want to speak for you, but the job that you want to do, right? I think about your father, and he was a protector, and everything that he did. It's really interesting to see the parallels there that you want to go and do the job that you're doing now. And to me, it just seems like one way of maybe keeping your father's memory alive in the passion that you have for that job that you feel called to.
Yes, sir. So I feel like I do less of carrying on his legacy in the public. I think I prefer to leave that more to my mom and my brother, and I think they do a very good job with it. And personally, I don't feel like I really have to try to keep it alive because it's just we all do have those memories of him, and we know what he was like. And so there were times when I was younger that I got scared that maybe I'll forget him someday, or maybe I'll forget what he looked like, or things like that. But I haven't, and I won't, because he was a big part of my life, and that's not something that I can forget. And I'll go back maybe like once a year and watch some of his interviews that he did and stuff like that. And like you said, I do feel like the way that I somewhat carry on his legacy is through law enforcement. I know he held law enforcement in very high regards. He said that they deploy every day, whereas he deployed for months at a time. And so it's cool for me to be able to kind of experience what he was interested in as well. And I also get to share memories with the deputies and things like that. And it's cool because they understand too. And I don't know, I just think it's really cool. And also the sheriff was good friends with my dad, and so it's cool in that way as well.
And she wears his dog tags all like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Never takes them off. Yeah.
Taya, you obviously have done so much speaking over the years, inspiring people through the foundation. You're helping people navigate complexities and relationships in life and so much more. One of the recent things you did was you put together a children's book, Prayers for Bears. And I want to make sure we link out to that. Let people grab that because it's an important resource for kids and for families. And I love with kids' books, the kid is learning, but the parents, as they're reading it, are learning too. So I just want to make sure we put that out there that you have that book. But what would your final words be? Just as we sit here today, there's so much more we could dig into, but I want to leave people with something powerful because there's so much to your story, the redemption and what your family went through. If you could just leave us with some powerful words today.
I think if anything, I just hope that people know when people hear somebody say God is good or he's always there, it can sound trite if you're really in the middle of a storm. And yet it is the truth. And it's about giving it time, right? That's what I noticed most of all with God is that the things we live in a culture where everything's immediate. And God is not handcuffed to our immediate culture. He will do what he will do, and he will do it in ways that we cannot imagine usually. It's like I always think of his creativity as infinite. So even if I'm imaginative and creative and I start thinking, well, he could do this and he could do that, it's like, just leave it. I promise, like I feel our life at least has shown me I could not imagine it. I could not plan it. And guess what? Thank God, literally, I don't have to. And he will heal you. It does take time because we're human. Like we can't absorb all the things we need to do to heal, but it does happen. And so for me, it's just I just want people to know it will happen. Even if it's 1 hour at a time, one sunset to one sunrise, it does happen. You do come out on the other end like we have.
Yeah, it's so incredible to see that and to see McKenna and Colton, you've grown up and you're doing these amazing things and you're in such a great place and your willingness to be so vulnerable with us today and to share with us because I think a lot of people they don't share. They don't want to get into those deeper, darker parts of themselves when they go through something like this. And yet this message is so important for people to hear. The three of you have given us your time and we're so grateful for that. We so appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it too. Billy, we talked in the beginning about Happy Memorial Day. Do you want me to touch on that?
Yeah, let's do that before we go, actually, because that is important. Let's talk about that because people, they'll say things like Happy Memorial Day, right? And there are lots of barbecues and parties. And in the right context, that's okay. But let's talk a little bit about the real meaning of the day, right? How can people appropriately engage in the holiday? How can people look at Memorial Day and say, we're going to celebrate this, commemorate this in the right way?
Yes. And so I feel like anytime somebody sends me a text on Memorial Day, Happy Memorial Day, I receive it the way I believe they intended it, which is they're just trying to say, I remember and thank you for your service. I don't take offense to it. I do know a lot of people who are in the military and do take offense because they feel like you're not understanding the meaning. If you're saying Happy Memorial, I'm remembering the brothers I lost, the sisters I lost. So it's not happy for them. And I would love for them not to take offense and just see the intention, but I thought it might be helpful to tell people instead, thinking of you on Memorial Day. I'm hoping this day brings you, whatever it is that you need this year or this time. And Chris and I, we would go to a cemetery that would have warriors buried there, and we would, even if we didn't know anybody or didn't live in a place where there was somebody close by, we would pray over them, we would remember the people we lost. And then we would take the kids and say a prayer there, and then we would go out and do the barbecue and the things they died for, to give us freedom to celebrate. So hopefully that helps somebody out there navigate sort of the meaning and the way to maybe even recognize the day.
Yeah, pausing to reflect, being able to be thankful, understanding the loss that people were willing to go through, right? Not just the individuals themselves, but their families, giving themselves up for freedom. And there's so many loved ones and family members who mourn that loss and obviously are proud of their loved ones.
Yes.
But this can be a tough time, I would imagine, of year for some people. And here we are, we get to enjoy these freedoms because of what people were willing to do. That's what the day actually means. And I think a lot of people, they get confused between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. So maybe you could just briefly help people understand the difference between the two so that confusion is cleared up a little bit.
It's a very good point. We do, and it's easy to do. But yeah, so veterans, it's like, thank you, and we're celebrating your service, and we're grateful. And Memorial Day really was to say, let's take a day to remember how many people have died for our freedom. And so the Memorial Day thing is, for many veterans, they think about it often, but they will set that day aside to really remember witnessing the death of their friends, seeing other people they didn't know carried off. It is a very traumatic thing for them to remember. And so veterans are alive and living, and we're appreciative. And then Memorial Day is who died on the battlefield, who lost their life because of the fight.
Yeah, and another thing I would add, just one more thing, praying for the loved ones and the family members who are grieving those who,
Yes.
who are left behind. They're grieving their loved ones who
Right.
have passed away. I think we don't often think about that, but Memorial Day is a great time to be reflecting and even making a list of the people around you who may be mourning or who may be grieving, and praying for them. That's important for us to be doing. And I really appreciate you taking the time again to break everything down for us today, to speak with us about your story. Thank you all.
It was an honor to speak with you too. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.